Hello, Astro subscribers. Today I am going to be going through a list of popular arguments against astrology and refuting them one by one. The reason I'm doing this is because sometimes if you tell people that you believe in astrology, they will come back with reasons why you shouldn't. And if you have a bunch of personal experiences where astrology has worked for you, then you can just not listen to them. But I also like to know the arguments against what I believe and know how to refute them and counteract them, because there's not very many of them. People tend to use the same arguments to refute astrology over and over, and I've found these 7 most common just by going through all the different search engines and typing in why astrology isn't real. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1, the predeterminism argument. And this is basically the statement that if astrology controls the future, then we would have no free will, and the future would be completely predetermined. The reason that this is not a good argument is that astrology doesn't actually say that there is no free will or that it's 100% proof of what's going to happen in the future. All it says is that the planets, their motions correspond to things on Earth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's absolute, or that it's the only thing that causes things. It's just a contributing factor, and it's a helpful contributing factor. It's a useful tool, not the only tool. Number 2, lack of statistical correlation. I've seen this. There have been no scientific studies that prove astrology statistically. This is not true. You have to look at the metrics that are used in the social sciences. While it is true that a lot of astrology papers will be stricken from journals because of basically anti-religious or anti-astrological bias, there are plenty of scientific studies that prove astrology to the standards that are considered significant by fields like psychology, sociology, and just basic statistical proofs that show a significant correlation with astrology that can't be explained by anything else. So yeah, you can just Google those scientific papers proving astrology, and if you look around for a minute, you'll find entire web pages full of them that you can see probability of substantial significance similar to the probabilities that are predicted by psychological constructs like the Big Five and that kind of thing, which are currently the best psychological predictors for personality besides IQ. And astrology reliably, when the studies are done properly, gets reliable results similar to the best findings in psychology at the moment. I would like to say that if people are interested in doing scientific research on astrology, it helps to know what you're doing. A lot of scientific researchers will do like sun sign astrology or astrology predictions based on newspaper horoscopes, and those tend to be kind of idiotic and not very well thought out. So they're kind of like doing a scientific analysis of fortune cookies. So if you're going to do research into something, you got to give the devil his due and actually understand that this is an integrated and multivariable field with and everything is connected to everything else. So anyway, the third argument is that there's no wave or way that gravity or electromagnetism or something could cause the planets to affect people. And I would say that this is just because we don't understand how these things function doesn't mean that they don't function, first off. But secondly, I don't actually think astrology is related to the planets influencing people any more than the people influence the planets. I think that there is simply just one pattern that gets repeated at every single level of resolution of a system. And it's the same reason that tarot works and other methods of divination work, is that there's actually only one pattern. Everything is correlated and related to everything else. And if you can get an insight into that pattern by understanding one process of the material world, then you can gain insight into how the mind functions. There have never been correct astrological predictions made. This is not true. If you have spent any time around people who do real good astrology, then you will know that that's simply not the case. I don't really need to go too much into that. 5, astrology is worded in a way that it's applicable to everyone. This is Richard Dawkins' favorite argument against it. He talks about Barnum statements and how people have written horoscopes using Barnum statements and people have agreed with them. And I would say, firstly, that that's obvious, because if you're making Barnum statements, then the point is to apply to everyone, so it's going to apply to everyone. But secondly, a lot of horoscopes are not worded in a way that's applicable to everyone, and I would say good horoscopes aren't, and that they can still give correct predictions. So, just because some people are using Barnum statements and some people relate to Barnum statements and agree with them, because everyone is supposed to be able to agree with them, just like everybody's supposed to be able to relate and agree to a fortune cookie, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's all astrology is. It just means that some people are con artists and some people are gullible. And that's obvious. Number 6, axial precession argument. So axial precession is the process of the sky as we perceive it slowly shifting around basically the axis of our local galaxy, and it happens at a rate of about 1 degree every 72 years. So given that several thousand years have passed since the first astrological predictions were really written down, at least the earliest ones that our society has ever been aware of, by the Egyptians and the Sumerians and the Mayans and all these people. Our cosmos has shifted substantially, so the argument is made that because the constellations are in a different place than they were back then, that it's all invalid. And this is kind of a silly argument because, one, I don't use sidereal astrology personally. I know people that do. They seem to get results. I've never gotten any good results with it personally. I don't know what they're doing that I'm not, but when it comes to sidereal astrology is the direct relationship between where everything is in the sky and where you are as a person. It's very literal. It's based on astronomical measurements day by day, and it's very direct and literal in terms of where everything is. I personally don't use that. I use tropical astrology, and tropical astrology is more based off of the concept of a Platonic ideal, in that and sacred geometry, in that there are sacred geometric forms that exist, that the sky is sort of a foggy mirror of. So just because the sky is not directly related to where everything is, it doesn't really matter, because the point of it is not to be astronomically accurate. The point of it is not to figure out where everything is in the sky. The point is to figure out how it relates to human beings. And if that relationship is more to an ideal geometric shape that is sort of mirrored in the sky, then something that's actually present in the sky literally and directly, then if it works, it works, and if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. As I've said, I know people who use sidereal astrology, which takes axial precession into account, but I personally get very good results using tropical astrology, which again is based on geometric forms as opposed to literal interpretation of where everything is in the sky from our perspective. Okay, and finally the Astro Twins argument, which is basically they consider the smallest unit of astrology to be the ascendant, and which basically is the same of every 2 hours. The ascendant changes roughly every 2 hours because it's based on the rotation of the Earth. And so they look at people born within the same hour or two and on the same day and on the same year. They call them Astro Twins, and then they very articulately and through careful analysis note that these people have had different lives, and therefore they say that astrology is not a good predictor. Now, I would say to this that, again, it kind of goes back to the first argument, the predeterminism argument, because again, astrology is not the only factor that determines a person's life. That's foolish. So somebody who is born, let's say, as an Aries in our society might be a soldier. They might be an entrepreneur. Depends on the house placement and all this, but they're going to have certain qualities that fit into our culture. Um, they might be a boxer, whatever it is. Now, somebody who's born as an Aries in a tribal society that still lives in like one of these unindustrialized nations, they're going to be still have these qualities. Like they're going to be like a warrior or something, but it's not going to be, there are going to be certain things that they can't be because they weren't born in the environment to be those things. Like they're going to be very unlikely to be like an entrepreneur, for instance. Um, if somebody's born a Taurus in one of these Aboriginal societies, they're not likely to become an investment banker or a hedge fund manager. What they're more likely to be is a caretaker, somebody who stores up resources that they accumulate, a cook. So these things, these archetypes, they fit within a cultural context. Every culture has its own version of the archetypes. And while they are similar, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be the same. And some societies, such as like North Korea, they try to strip everybody of their identity so that everybody is very much the same. And while people's individual differences may still exist, they are going to be forcibly tried to be beaten out of them by these people. So there's definitely an environmental effect on people. There's a cultural effect on people. And, those two, astrology and archetypes and different cultures can exist at the same time without it being a contradiction. The other point about the Astro Twins argument is that the ascendant is by no means the smallest unit of observation of a person. So there's many things more detailed than the ascendant. Nakshatras are smaller than ascendants. Hours are smaller than ascendants. All the divisional cell charts which we'll get into later on this channel, are more precise measurements than ascendants. I mean, some of these even go down into the second sort of level of detail, like so people can be born like 4 seconds apart. And again, just even if somebody was born literally on the exact same time, on the same day in the same year, which is quite rare, but does happen, their cultures are still going to be different, and I guarantee you would be able to find very tight similarities between these people. So, assuming everything indeed was the same and they weren't just not looking at the right level of detail. So anyway, that was my video on refuting different arguments against astrology. I hope you found this useful. If there's somebody in your life who doesn't like astrology, is constantly trying to convince you out of it, then maybe this video can give you some ways to defend your beliefs. All right, so yeah, tune in next time.